Most people in the gym are getting volume wrong in one of two directions. Either they are doing 3 sets of chest on Monday and calling it a week, or they are doing 30 sets per session and wondering why their joints hurt and nothing is growing. Both mistakes are extremely common. Both have the same cause: no clear framework for how much training actually drives muscle growth versus how much just creates fatigue. This video covers how many sets per week are actually needed to build muscle, broken down by training experience level. That includes the research on dose response, the framework that makes it practical, the per session limits that most people ignore, and how to know when to add more volume versus when to pull back. By the end, there will be a clear, specific answer for beginners, intermediates, and advanced lifters, and a way to think about volume that holds up no matter how training evolves over time. Before getting into numbers, there is a framework worth understanding. Dr. Mike Israetel and Renaissance Periodization developed a volume landmark system that organizes training volume into 4 distinct zones. Every practical recommendation in this space flows from this structure. The first landmark is maintenance volume, or MV. This is roughly 6 sets per muscle group per week, just enough training to keep existing muscle without triggering meaningful growth. It is useful during high-stress periods, travel, or deload weeks, but it is not a growth phase. The second landmark is minimum effective volume, or MEV. This is the starting point where growth begins. It varies by muscle group and training history, but it typically sits around 8 to 10 sets per week for most muscles in an intermediate lifter. Below MEV, training still produces some adaptation, but the return is minimal. The third landmark is maximum adaptive volume, or MAV. This is the sweet spot, the range where the body is getting enough stimulus to grow, but not so much that recovery cannot keep up. MAV is not a fixed number. It shifts upward as fitness improves and can be different for every muscle group. The fourth landmark is maximum recoverable volume, or MRV. This is the ceiling. Beyond MRV, training still happens, but the body cannot recover from it fast enough to adapt. The result is stalled progress, elevated injury risk, and accumulated fatigue that looks a lot like overtraining. According to Dr. Israetel, the goal of any training block is to start near MEV and build volume progressively toward MAV over several weeks, then deload before MRV is crossed. Volume is not a dial set once and left alone. It is a range, and different phases of training require different positions within that range. The framework describes how to think about volume. The research fills in the actual numbers, and those numbers are more specific and more forgiving than most people expect. The most cited body of work in this area comes from research by Schoenfeld and colleagues, whose meta-analysis on resistance training volume and muscle hypertrophy consistently shows a positive dose-response relationship. More volume, up to a point, produces more muscle growth. The question is where that point is. Research by Dr. Lane Norton helps establish the shape of the curve. Studies show that 6 sets per muscle per week outperforms 3 sets. 12 sets outperforms 6. But beyond roughly 12 to 20 sets per week, returns diminish significantly. The gains do not stop, they just get smaller per additional set. Dr. Milo Wolf's 2024 meta-analysis on high-volume training and hypertrophy added important precision to this picture. According to Dr. Wolf, 10 weekly sets per muscle yield roughly 40% of the maximum potential muscle growth. Doubling that volume from 10 to 20 sets can boost muscle growth by approximately 50% more. And training up to 32 weekly sets per muscle group does not increase overtraining risk, provided volume is built progressively rather than added all at once. That last point matters. The research does not say 30 sets per week is optimal. It says 30 sets per week is recoverable when the body has been prepared for it. There is a meaningful difference. The research makes the dose response clear. More volume produces more growth, but the law of diminishing returns applies hard above 20 weekly sets. For most people, the biggest gains come from the first 10 to 15 sets. Everything beyond that is incremental. Knowing the dose-response curve is useful. Knowing where a specific training level sits on that curve is more useful. Based on experience-based recommendations from Jeff Nippard, the practical breakdown looks like this. Beginners, roughly 0 to 1 year of consistent training, respond to 4 to 8 sets per muscle per week. The body is so sensitive to the training stimulus at this stage that more volume is rarely needed. The priority is learning movement patterns, building consistency, and staying injury-free. Volume can be added once those things are established. Intermediates, 1 to 3 or 4 years of training, typically need 8 to 15 sets per muscle per week to keep growing. This is where the dose-response relationship becomes more important because the easy gains from novelty are gone and volume becomes a real driver of adaptation. Advanced lifters, 4 or more years of consistent, well-structured training often need 15 to 20 sets or more per muscle per week to continue progressing. At this level, the body has adapted extensively to training stress and requires a higher stimulus to keep adapting. One principle applies to all 3 levels. The weekly volume should be spread across at least 2 sessions per muscle group per week. A single massive session is less effective than the same total sets distributed more frequently. Research consistently shows that training a muscle twice per week outperforms once per week for equal volume. The per session cap matters here. According to research reviewed by Stronger by Science and Greg Nuckols, diminishing returns begin to kick in at around 10 to 11 sets per muscle group in a single workout. Doing 15 sets for biceps in one session does not produce 15 sets worth of stimulus, recovery, and performance degrade within the session itself. Splitting those sets across 2 or 3 sessions produces better results. Volume targets are weekly totals, not single session targets. The split matters as much as the number. There is one more variable that determines whether a given set count actually produces growth: how hard each set is pushed, and this changes everything about how to count volume. A set stopped 8 reps short of failure does not produce the same stimulus as a set taken to within 1 or 2 reps of failure. Research on proximity to failure consistently shows a strong relationship between how close a set gets to muscular failure and how much growth it drives. This means that total set count and effective set count are not the same thing. Counting sets accurately means counting hard sets, sets where the last few reps are genuinely difficult. A typical gym session where most sets are left with excessive reps in reserve is producing far less stimulus than the set count suggests. This is one of the most common reasons intermediate lifters plateau while thinking they are doing enough volume. The flip side is also true. Sets taken very close to or past failure every session accumulate fatigue quickly and push MRV closer. This is why recovery is the actual governor of how much volume an individual can absorb. According to research discussed by Greg Nuckols and Stronger by Science, the 3 recovery variables that determine individual MRV are sleep quality and quantity, nutritional status, particularly protein intake and total calorie intake, and training frequency, which affects how much recovery time is available between sessions. A lifter sleeping 6 hours a night, under-eating protein, and training each muscle only once per week will have a lower MRV than a lifter doing the opposite. Volume recommendations are averages. Individual recovery determines where any given person falls within the range. Volume is only as useful as the recovery that follows it. Hard sets, adequate sleep, sufficient protein, and smart frequency are what allow the body to absorb the training and grow from it. Here are the practical recommendations by training level. Beginners: 4 to 8 hard sets per muscle per week. Spread across 2 sessions minimum. Focus on learning movement, building consistency, and hitting those sets with genuine effort. More volume is not needed yet. Intermediates: 8 to 15 hard sets per muscle per week. 2 sessions per muscle is the floor. No more than 10 to 11 sets per muscle in any single session. Build volume progressively over a training block. Deload every 4 to 6 weeks. Advanced lifters: 15 to 20 sets per week, potentially higher for lagging muscle groups. 3 or more sessions per muscle per week may be needed to keep volume manageable per session. Volume cycling, periods of higher and lower volume, helps manage fatigue and keeps adaptation happening over the long term. For everyone, a set only counts if it is genuinely hard. Sleep enough, eat enough protein, and let recovery determine the ceiling. Volume is not the secret to building muscle, but getting it right enough to grow, not so much that recovery fails, is one of the few training variables where the research is clear and the payoff is real. Want more fast fitness tips like this? Check out the next video here.